Today, you will learn why I wrote this buying auto insurance in Maryland guide all the way back in 2011. And then in 2014, I updated it to release the newest edition, making the most of your Maryland auto insurance policy. And today we talk about the newest edition that's coming to you later this year. Learn why, learn what, and how to get one today. Good morning, Cecil County, Maryland, everywhere that you might be seeing this. It's your accident and injury guy, Joe with Bowers, coming at you from my Elkton office on, I don't know, looks like it might be rainy today. I'm hearing a few drops, but who knows? It might hold off. Today, we're going to talk about auto insurance. We're going to talk about these books that I wrote in previous decades and the newest one, which is an updated version of this. We're going to talk about why I wrote the books in the first place, why I keep them updated, what important information is in there for you, and why you need to get your hands on a copy. If you've been watching the podcast for the past couple of years that I've been doing it, then it's very obvious the answer to all of those questions, except for maybe the specifics of what's going to be in the newest book, which is currently being edited. It's basically at the finish line, and it should be published possibly, we're looking at September for the release date, early September, but we'll probably know exactly where that is this week or next. It's going to be available on Amazon, but more importantly, you're going to be able to get it from me absolutely free whenever you might want. So let's start with the beginning. Why I wrote this book originally back in 2011. Well, I deal with injured people. I deal with injured people who are, for the most part, stuck dealing with the insurance limits that are available to whoever caused the accident, and in some instances, their own policy. If you watch just last week's the episode that I talked about with respect to policy limit settlements and things that were common amongst those, and how most certainly every single time we would have gotten more if there were more insurance. And quite frankly, and even more so today, the ability to go after somebody directly for additional assets that are above and beyond most auto insurance policies are very, very difficult, very expensive, very time consuming, and oftentimes not worth it to go through the whole process. There are certain situations in which it is, and certain situations in which insurance companies force us to go all the way to the finish line when it comes to litigation. Those are very, very situational. But really what this boils down to is everything that I spoke about last week. And that was me working in one of these offices. At the time that I wrote the very, very first book, I was working for another law firm. I was not running the show and on my own, but that attorney and I had a very, very close relationship. We were super interested in educating the general public on the issues that could potentially spring up. We dealt with a lot of large cases. Well, let's be clear, a lot of cases with significant injuries, but insignificant insurance coverage. I remember one such case, which may have actually been the one that, like, the straw that broke the camel's back, was me driving all the way to the Ocean City area to meet with a lady who had been seriously injured in an accident, to the point where I was meeting her a week after the accident in a inpatient rehab facility. So she was at the ER. She had her hips crushed. She had surgeries. She was released from the ER, sent to this rehab facility where she was going to be there for another 6 to 8 weeks, possibly longer. It's been so long that I don't recall the time frame, but the generalities of it. And fast forward to every element and looking at that case, ultimately, the other driver, I don't believe, had insurance, if I remember correctly. And again, this is a story from probably 15, 16 years ago. So I am going to forget some of the intricate details. And it was a different firm, so it's not like I could even look it up to be like, what were the details on this? But I believe it was an completely uninsured motorist claim, where the vehicle that she was in only had a $50,000, $100,000 policy, and we exhausted all other options to potentially find additional money, and that's it. This lady, we resolved her case for $50,000, a case that probably even then, 15 years ago, would have been very, very close to $1 million case, if not more. Again, because I don't really recall all of the details. I just know it was incredibly severe. And I said, that's enough. I'm going to make this effort. And it really was one of the times in which it turned the page on me becoming somebody that was an advocate and an educator on insurance. And then when I opened my own practice back here in Elkton in 2014, I figured it was appropriate, and there were some changes and updates in the laws. In fact, when the blue copy of this book, the very first one, came out, the mandatory minimum insurance limits, if I remember correctly, were $20,000 per person, $40,000 per accident. And I believe at the time, yep, they sure were. It says it right here, 2040. We were in the process with the Maryland Association for Justice for lobbying to increase those limits to $30,000, $60,000, which by the time edition 2 had come into play, that was the law. 3060 was then, at that time, the minimum. I don't know why I'm looking through to confirm this, because that happened, and I know that it happened before this, because it happened really around the time that the Blue Book came out. I think it was the very, very next year, the insurance policy limits changed. So, boom, we go to 3060. Now we have enhanced UIM. We have all sorts of other things. I've expanded it significantly. So without further ado, first thing I want to do is just show you the current subject to change mock-up cover and title. We are getting a little more aggressive. As you can see, and the first one was just buying auto insurance in Maryland. Not really an exciting topic. Then I upgraded it so that it had a little bit more purpose to how it's going to help you, because who really wants to buy a book about or read a book about buying insurance in Maryland? So now it's making the most of your Maryland auto insurance policy. It's a little bit more direct until the 2026 edition, where I just come right into play. Your insurance policy sucks, because the likelihood that it does, unless you've been listening to this, or I've coached you or guided you, or you actually have one of those good insurance agents, your insurance policy sucks. Why you'll eventually regret it, and how to fix it before it's too late. Super important. You may recognize the image from the front. Ooh, we kept that the same. Fun times, totally irrelevant. How do you get a copy of this book, and why would you want a copy of this book? Well, number one, you don't need a copy of this book. But if you get one of the insurance reviews that I do for absolutely free, which is also going to give you a chance, let me point to the right thing, to win Ravens season tickets, and we'll donate $5 to Voices of Hope as long as you're doing that this month, in the month of August. I'm going to do a review of your insurance policy, and once it's released, I will mail you out a physical copy of the new book. No charge to you. So you're going to get the book. You're going to be entered to win Ravens tickets. You're going to get your insurance policy reviewed, which will quite frankly negate the need for the book. But you're going to get the book too. That way, if you have questions down the line, you don't feel like bugging me, you're more than welcome to go take a look at them. What's going to be in this book? Now, also, if you entered the contest that we did back in April, you are also lined up and will be mailed one of the copies of the book. So anybody that I've done an insurance review, I'm going to have a stack of them at the office. Clients coming in will be able to get their hands on them. Don't buy this book. Don't buy the book. Just come talk to me. You'll get it for free. What's in the book? What's in the book? Now, a lot of this is updated from previous editions of the book, but it's quite expansive. It's probably going to be twice the length of the original book from back in 2011, which quite frankly was barely large enough for us to get it bound. This book has got more. So some of it's the basic stuff. but I'm going to go dig deep into why most people's insurance policy sucks. I'm going to give you kind of a framework and guide points for actually how to take this book when you have it and use it to rip your own insurance policy apart and put it back together and find out yourself if for whatever reason you didn't want to utilize me for the insurance review. But again, this is still only applicable here in Maryland. We're going to break down those types of insurance coverage, which will include personal injury protection. That was in the last book, collision, rental coverage, liability, uninsured and uninsured motorists. All of those things were in the previous book, but I've updated them. If you somehow have the previous book sitting around, wow, I don't know. That's impressive. I'd love to see it. We're going to talk about enhanced underinsured motorists, which of course is new for this edition because that not only came into play in 2018, but it has since updated in 2024. So all of that's going to be covered in this updated edition. Something that was new in edition 2, but was not in edition 1 is gap insurance. This is something that comes into play with respect to the vehicle. And if you still have payments on it and it's a total loss. Then we get into the nitty gritty. Everything here is pretty much new stuff for the new edition. We're going to talk about the common mistakes that most people make when putting their auto policy together. Do 2 of those mention waiving PIP with Geico or Progressive when you're buying online? I'm sure they do. Generalized insurance buying tips. Also, because most of my client base, most of my watchers, my listeners, everything like that, everybody who I'm doing this for, while it's open to the entire state of Maryland, the vast majority of what we do is right here in Cecil County. So with our proximity to Delaware and Pennsylvania, we're going to talk a bit, and there's an entire chapter in here about multi-state accidents because all of the rules, especially in those 3 states, are drastically different. So it's very, very important to know how to navigate those. Number 14 is something that I like a lot because one of the reasons why, which you'll see in chapter 2, that people's insurance policies suck is that number one of those reasons, a little bit of a spoiler alert for the book, you bought the policy online. The number 2 reason probably has to do with you having an agent that we could swap out the title of this book where it says insurance policy and make it say insurance agent and probably still be right. That's one of the reasons. So I put in an entire chapter. It's not super long, but it's a handful of questions that you should be asking an insurance agent when you're considering doing business with them. And this is going to be specific to Maryland. It's going to be some questions that if they give you the wrong answer, and there's discussion on, hey, if they go in this direction, they don't know what they're doing. Or if they don't have an answer, they don't know what they're doing. Important stuff to know. Now, keep in mind, the dumbest, most uninvolved, uneducated, just barely scraped by insurance agent can still write you a great policy because ultimately there's an insurance carrier that's taking care of it. And if you were to get a quote from a bad insurance agent and send it to me for a review, which you can do, you don't have to have an active policy for me to review. I'll review, this is super important, I will review a policy that you're thinking about. There, I'll ask you to send me your current policy and the new policy so I can compare and contrast you to the new you. But also, I will tweak it and I will fix it. So number 14, if you don't necessarily need to vet the agent if you're buying and having me review it, I'm happy to do that for you. And then, as always, I always put questions that aren't necessarily covered in that book specifically that might come up, that aren't really, they don't belong in the book, but they're attached to the conversation that come up, some frequently asked questions. So we throw those in there as well. So lots and lots of stuff. And again, the book is absolutely free. It's going to be releasing soon. The easiest way to get a copy of it, to literally have a copy of it mailed to you, is to go have me take a look at your insurance policy. Go to marylandinsuраncebook.com, sign up for the review. It's absolutely free. And again, you could do that with the current policy or if you're shopping a policy, because you should be doing that every year or 2 years. If you're shopping a policy, flip that over to me. I'll take a look at it and say, hey, you missed this or you missed that, or this is fantastic. So that's all I have for today. I wanted to talk about the book. I wanted to give some information about what's going to be in this version of the book, how it's different from the previous ones, how to get it for free. Please, all I can ask is that you tell your friends, your family members, somebody that's near to you, hey, if you had your insurance policy looked at by somebody that's not trying to sell you insurance, because that would be me, that would be at marylandinsuраncebook.com. So that's all I have for this week. Looking forward to doing more and more of these insurance reviews. We've had a decent clip so far, and I'm really looking for this thing to ramp up now that we're in the middle of the month here. So as always, if you need past episodes of the podcast, go to bowerslawmd.com. We talked about last week's episode and the policy limits offers. Hit podcast. That one, if you're watching this live, will be the first one there because it was just last week. BowersLawMD.com, right up at the top where it says podcast. It's always a great place to get in touch with us if you need us for an accident, because that's what we do right here in Cecil County. We are the accident and injury people. It's all we do. Got a question for the podcast? info@BowersLawMD.com. We'll talk about it on the air. Make sure you mention that you want it talked about on the podcast. That way I know to do it, and you don't just get a response with the answer and then never see it on the podcast. Also, any of those inquiries, even if they are for the podcast, are going to be strictly anonymous. I'm not going to put your name out there. I'm not going to talk, I will, if you give me very, very detailed information that's clearly and specifically attributed to one situation, I will step back from it. I will explain it in general so that it doesn't directly apply to you, but then still does, because you'll be able to fill in the gaps on how it applies to your situation. And of course, call me. That's what our office is here for. The phone number is right here on the scroll at the bottom. That's all the time I have for you this week. Same time next week, same channel. Be safe. Be well. See you next week.